Hey y'all, it's Megan from Made for Mermaids, and today we are going to be sewing up some of the Gable boxer briefs. I'm going to sew up the youth version for my son, but the process is going to be exactly the same for the adult version as well. So we're going to start with cutting our fabric. I pressed mine a little bit because it was wrinkly. You're just going to fold your fabric in half. And the stretch is going with the pattern on this one, so this way. You're going to make sure it's nice and flat, and you're going to lay your main piece on the fold. Just like this. Whatever length that you're cutting, you can go ahead and cut, or you can fold it up, which is what I normally do. Just fold it up like this so you don't have to keep recutting or printing patterns if you plan on making several pairs. So now I have my 2 layers, my piece on the fold. Everything is nice and flat, and I will just cut around the piece. I am using a cotton lycra here, which is my favorite to use for my son. Now when I get to the back, I'm just going to make a tiny notch at the center. So when later I add the elastic or the waistband, I won't have to find the notch. It'll save me a little bit of time. Or not find the notch, find the center. Okay. So these are super quick because all you need is your main piece on your fold, and then you need a center piece. So if you don't plan on adding the fly, you're going to use this piece and you just cut 1. If you want to have the fly, then you would use, it's the same piece, this is just cut away. If you don't want to print 2 and plan on making them, you can also just snip it like this and then fold it back. But if you're going to do the fly, then you would use 2 of these pieces, and you need it mirror image. So that means, I'm not going to cut this, but that means when you lay your fabric out, you want them folded, so you're getting a left and a right piece. And then for the fly option, you would also need 2 of the fly binding pieces. If you don't want to use binding, you could also use fold over elastic in place to finish this edge. I think on this one, I'll probably use the same fabric. I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and make a fly on this one. So I have my fabric folded. Just make sure your stretch is going the right direction. It's pretty easy with a print. Usually they're printed with the fabric. Okay. So I'm cutting 2 of these. I'll go back and cut out that little piece right here in a minute. I'm actually going to use scissors to cut this part. I think it'll be easier on the curve to get it just right. Okay, just kidding. I'm going to use my ruler. I'm so used to it, it's hard for me to use scissors now. There we go. So I have my 2 center pieces. And then I'm also going to use the binding. Let's see if this can work. Yeah, I'll just use my scraps here. What's really nice about this pattern, you can actually use scraps for a lot of it, especially the youth version, because the pieces are small. So I got my 2 binding pieces. And then the only other thing you need to cut is you will choose if you want to do an enclosed fabric waistband, or if you want to do the exposed brief elastic. For that, I usually get mine, looks just like this, at Joann's. You can get really cute ones that are printed on Etsy, and even Amazon has a whole bunch of cute ones. I think for this one, let's see, I wish I had enough of this, but I don't. Okay. I guess for this one, I'll go ahead and do the fabric waistband. And when you use the fabric waistband, you're also going to cut elastic, a 1-inch elastic to go inside. There we go. I like to use knit elastic. You can use woven elastic, you just might need to adjust it a little bit. So you're going to cut 1 elastic piece, just like that. And then you're also going to cut 1 fabric piece. Go ahead and keep it the same fabric, so it's really easy to tell the front and the back. My husband's a firefighter, so I have a ton of fire truck fabric. I used to always buy it when he was little, and now he's not so much into fire trucks, but still use it. Okay, so there's my waistband piece on the fold. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on my waistband piece that I did on the main piece and just put a little notch at the center front so it's really easy to see later. Okay, now I've got everything we need. There is my waistband and elastic, my main piece, and then my centers and my binding. Okay, since I'm using the fly option on this one, the first thing we're going to do is finish the fly right here. So I have my binding piece, which looks like this, and I just took it to my ironing board and I pressed these to the center and then pressed it in half again, just like you would a bias tape. So now you can attach this a couple different ways. You can first stitch like this, the right side to the wrong side of the binding, stitch on that first line and then fold it over, or you can just stitch it with the fly right in the center, which is what I'm going to do just to make it a little bit faster. So I'm going to clip the ends. Now this is the exact, this piece is the exact length of the fly, but because it's curved, you're gonna have to pull just a little bit and ease it in. So this part, you'll just pull, and you want the edge of the fabric right in the center of the binding piece. You'll just stretch it a little bit and pin it in place like that, and then we'll stitch it, and then I'll press it with an iron, and I'm going to do the exact same thing to this piece. Okay, so I got the binding pieces stitched on. Now you're going to overlap the 2 center pieces. You'll maybe want to check with whoever is wearing them if they have a preference of which side the opening is on. We found during testing that some testers liked them on a certain side because it was easier for them to use, or you can check the ready-to-wear ones that they have. Okay, so I placed them right on top of each other like this, and you can see the binding, there's a little bit extra, and you're just going to snip that off. So you can see here, there's just a tiny bit extra. Snip it. Snip. I'm gonna look this way. So there's just those little triangle pieces. All right. Now you're going to want to baste these two together. So what I do is just start from one of the binding edges, go around to this one, then around all the way like that. And then you're going to treat this as one piece. Okay, so we're going to pretend that mine are basted together. My sewing machine was having a little bit of a fit. So after you baste these together, you're going to take your main piece, and I have just unfolded it, so I only have one layer here. And now we're going to stitch the center front to the main piece. So you're going to turn this right sides together, and you're going to align the top, and I like to put a pin here. And then you're just going to pin this here along the curve. What I like to do is pin one at the top and one at the bottom, like this. And then start pinning the rest. Now again, this should, you can see there's not really any ease there. They're the exact same measurement, but because they're opposite curves, it's going to feel like maybe they don't match, but you'll just align the right sides and pin them like that. So here's that other side, you can see that curve. And now we're going to take it to the sewing machine or to your serger, and you're going to stitch these together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I have that all stitched. Now if you want, you can press the seam toward the main piece and go ahead and top stitch it. You don't have to, but you can if you want. That is what it looks like. Now we need to attach the other side to this main piece. So we're going to do the same thing. Lay the other side out flat. Make sure your boxers don't get twisted here. And then you're going to pin again the center front to the main piece along the curve. Exact same way. And then we're going to take it back to your sewing machine or serger and stitch again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So it looks just the same, just like that, and we're going to stitch. Okay, so now you should just have one piece. Turn it right side out so you can see what it looks like. This, again, you can press this seam toward the main piece and then top stitch along each side if you like. It looks really cute if you do a reverse cover stitch. Now what I'm going to do, you don't have to do this step, but I really like the way it looks when I'm hemming to press. So I'm going to take it to my ironing board, and I'm just going to press the hemline up 1/2 inch to create a memory press. So what that means is I'm not going to press it yet, but it's going to have a nice crisp edge, so when I do press it, I don't have to do it when it's already in the round like this, because that makes it a little more difficult to get a nice clean press. Okay, I quickly did that memory press, but now you're just going to unfold it so you can see I have a crease line there. And now we're going to stitch the inseam. You can kind of lay this out flat, and what you're going to do is you're going to match the raw edge here, and you're going to start pinning. Again, what I like to do is match one edge, then the other, then the center, and then go ahead and start easing the curves together. Okay. There we go. You see how those just match right up? If yours aren't matching up, I would just double check that you took the full 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side of your center front piece. If you did take a full 1/2 inch seam allowance and they still aren't matching up, it could be that your fabric shifted while cutting. If it's just a little bit off, just stretch it a little bit and match them anyways. Okay, so there's the inseam. And I actually like to, when I stitch it, just straighten it out like this. It makes it much easier. And now we're gonna sew these together, again with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now the inseam is all sewn. I'm gonna go ahead and press that memory press back up and throw a clip or two in it so it doesn't come out. Usually I use a little bit of Best Press or spray starch alternative to help hold the hem. And then next we're going to add our waistband, and we're almost done. These are so quick to make since there's not a lot of seaming. Even when you add the optional fly, which adds a few steps, they're still super quick. Okay, now I'm going to turn these right side out. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to set these aside for just a minute and we're going to work on our waistband. So for the waistband, you're going to take your piece and fold it in half, right sides together, and we're going to stitch this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to do the same with the elastic. Now you can either overlap it, which is what I like to do. Let me just give this a little stretch real quick. Exercise this a little bit so it's not super tight. We're going to overlap it by a 1/2 inch, and then I like to use my sewing machine to stitch, stitch, stitch. Hopefully it'll cooperate this time. And these are going to be the exact same length. If you didn't want to add the elastic, you're going to need to make the waistband smaller. If you have the Levi pattern, that pattern has a waistband without elastic, so you can just switch them in and out, and you can use a Levi waistband on Gables. But otherwise, this waistband without elastic is probably not going to be tight enough. The elastic makes it nice and snug because the elastic's a lot tighter, of course. So I'm going to stitch these, stitch this together, overlapped, like that. I use a 3-step zigzag for that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, luckily my machine played nice, so I got these both stitched together. Now you're going to slip the elastic around the waistband, and then we're going to fold the waistband around the elastic like this. I just stick a few clips in it to make it easier. So what I do is I just put the elastic along the bottom edge and then fold the fabric around it. And there's my little center notch I cut. Continue to do the same. Just tucking that elastic inside the waistband. And you're going to have just enough room on the raw edge, you can see here, for your seam allowance to attach. let me go ahead and quarter. Doing the tornado drill, so just ignore that. I went ahead and quartered, so there's my center back, there's my center front, and then I match those and put a pin at the quarter points. Now we're going to do the same thing with the main boxers. So I already have that center notch that I cut. So I'll place a pin there. And then a pin at the center front, and then we'll match those two. For the quarter points. This just makes it easier to make sure that the waistband is going on evenly. Okay. There we go. So here's your waistband, and you're going to, I'm actually going to flip mine because I want the fire truck. Well, I guess he'd be upside down. I'll leave it. Okay, so now we're going to put the waistband over the main piece, and we're just going to pin the quarter points. Now this isn't going to stretch too much. The waistband isn't super tight, even as tight as a normal waistband, because it does have that elastic, so you don't want it to be squeezing them. But you'll pin like this, and you can go ahead and do a few more pins if you like, but you can see it's not stretching an awful lot right here. I don't know if you can see like that. Sometimes on a waistband you're stretching the waistband a lot to match the main piece, but that's not the case on these because they already have a lot of negative ease, and then with the elastic it makes them tighter, which is why if you don't want to add the elastic, you're going to need to adjust the waistband. Okay, so I'm just carefully making sure my raw edges line up, and I'm putting just one more pin. Since it does have the elastic, it's a little more finicky since you have the elastic inside the waistband. It's a little more finicky, so I like to go ahead and pin it all. Okay. There we go. Now I'm going to take it to my serger, and when I serge it, I like to serge it this way with the waistband on top. So I have a feel for the elastic to make sure it's completely out of the way of the knife and everything. You want the elastic inside to be as close to the fold line, this fold line, as possible, so you don't get this caught in the seam. All right, well, we're going to stitch it, and then I'm going to press it, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we stitched the waistband, and then you're just going to flip it up. And I did give this a little bit of a press. If you have any waviness anywhere, usually if you just hit it with a little steam on your iron, it's going to press it right out. If you want to, you can stitch down your elastic. I like to do it in the back since there's already a seam. This elastic is pretty tight in the waistband, so you shouldn't have any problems with it turning or moving, but if you're worried about it, you can stitch it right there just on top to hold the elastic in place, or you can stitch it on each side, whatever you prefer. Now the last thing we need to do is just hem the leg line. So I've already pressed it up earlier and it stayed pretty nice like that. So you're just going to press it 1/2 inch, and then you're going to edge stitch along with a stretch stitch, because this is going to stretch to their thigh, or I like to use my cover stitch. All right, so now I've hemmed the leg line on each side and the boxers are complete. You saw they were so quick to make since there's only a few seams. I'm going to do another video and I'll go ahead and link it below or right here on top with the other options of doing the full front without this and then the exposed brief elastic if you want to watch that. If you did make some gables, I would love to see if you can post them in our Facebook group or tag us on Instagram. It always makes us so excited to see your patterns. If you'd like to see any other sew through videos, please let me know and we'll try to get them done. Thanks so much. Bye.